Harvard Divinity School.
100 Years Rudolf Steiner, December 15th and 16th, 2025.
I'm very grateful that it was possible to integrate in our conference and contribution about Rudolf Steiner's last book, because we do not only celebrate his death day, 100 years, but also his very last book. And he finished this very last book definitely 2 days before he died. And then he handed over the carefully corrected manuscript to Ita Wegman. And to the part of the unique features of that book is that it is the only book he wrote in co-authorship with an expert. He refused always to be seen as someone who is himself treating patients. He only gave advice to professionals. So if doctors were asking for their patients and advice, of course he shared what he could share, but he never wanted to treat himself. And in this book, he definitely made it clear that only ordinary mainstream trained physicians should study anthroposophic medicine. And so for him, it was clear that doctors, anthroposophic doctors who attended his courses about medicine, they should write this book. And he was waiting for long so that these freshly trained anthroposophic physicians would write a vademecum, would write the methodology of anthroposophic medicine, but no one dared to do that. And so maybe that's really a nice remark. It was October 23 that in Vienna, during a big East-West conference, no, it was in June, and it was another beautiful conference in Vienna, it was in autumn, that Ita Wegman, this Dutch physician and co-worker of Rudolf Steiner, was standing with people of the Anthroposophic Society, and he was talking with other people. And so Ita Wegman heard that Rudolf Steiner said to his conversation partners, "I'm going to write a book together with Ita Wegman." So that was the first time that she got to know that she was seen as a co-author. But it was so important that she heard that, because from that moment on, she reminded him, when will we start? You wanted to do that. When can you take time? You know, without her pushing and knowing it's the last chance, so to say, the book would not have been written. And because the last half year of Rudolf Steiner's life, she was, as a physician, together with another physician, Ludwig Noll, really accompanying Rudolf Steiner in his last period of life. Also, this book played a big role, and really chapter by chapter, sentence by sentence, they worked it through together. She brought the whole mainstream knowledge. She was qualified as a GP, as a gynecologist, and he brought the whole spiritual insight into that. And it's, to a certain extent, really the fundament of all anthroposophic medical development. And I would like first just to give you a little overview how the anthroposophic medical movement, which is still small in comparison with Waldorf and Demeter and biodynamic farming, but it's still, well, it's still small, but widespread. And for me, witnessing this over the last decades, how this development of the anthroposophic medical movement took place is really a wonder. You know, I had the privilege to work almost 30 years at the Goetheanum, responsible for the medical section and movement. And people, outstanding people who get to hear, medical section, Goetheanum, then they think you are the headquarter, you organize, you push, you promote, but it's totally other way around. You are the place in which people are coming from all over the world and asking you, can we meet? Can we support? And Anthroposophic medicine, and I'm sure what we all have heard here about the other professional movements, it is founded, spreaded, moved on by individuals who meet anthroposophy, who feel touched. It is a movement completely from within. You cannot push. It doesn't work. It's at least my experience. And therefore, I would just like to show you some pictures and give a short, brief overview how this spreading of the anthroposophic medical movement took place. And then I will focus on the book. This is Ita Wegman and Rudolf Steiner, the two authors. And the system of anthroposophic medicine today is in some countries highly accepted. It is now working in about 60 countries on all continents. And we have about 55 therapeutic, medical, and hospital centers. And of course, hundreds, no one knows how many, small therapeutic and medical practices worldwide. And currently 11 university chairs and a vivid research community. So some of our colleagues are totally committed to research. And then some hospitals. This is our hospital founded by Ita Wegman, which had then a follower, purely oncological oriented. It was the so-called Lucas Clinic, but when we say in German or Switzerland clinic, it means hospital. And now they are together. We have Haus Lucas, part of the Clinic Arlesheim, and the new building, which will open this and next year, a huge new wooden building. And that was Ita Wegman's foundation in 1921. And Rudolf Steiner supported her in just starting. She started with 9 physicians and 15 beds per hospital. So it was a research institute. Every patient was surrounded by doctors and nurses and therapists and pharmacists looking what might be the specific remedy for this patient in this situation. We have more than 500 beautiful case stories worked together with Rudolf Steiner. There's an archive. This was the first psychiatric hospital in Buchenbach, Germany. And that is the whole setting of that. Then a nice dependance of the Ita Wegman Hospital, Casa di Cura, a rehab center, then Herdecke Community Hospital, totally integrated in the healthcare system, the regional. Then again, it's a big hospital. Then the community hospital in Stuttgart, Filter Clinic is the name, also integrated in the healthcare system in southern Germany. And you see, a bit analog to the Waldorf movement, the patient who is received in difficult times shall, via the senses, experience beauty, colors, hair. Yeah, it's also this Schiller's aesthetic in medicine. You find it in the architecture. Then Eschelbronn, also Germany. Another smaller one in the Blackwood in Germany. and then a former military base, a hospital in Berlin, which was handed over after the fall of the Iron Curtain. And there, of course, one could not make an aesthetic building, but one tried then within the building to find beautiful colors and so on. And here a quick view in some therapies, that is eurythmy therapy, then music therapy, very successful in palliative care and intensive care units, painting therapy, rhythmic massage. And that is the cover of this first book, an exemplar from 1925. And beside Rudolf Steiner critical edition, which Christian Clement edited this year, also to celebrate 100 years of this book, with a big introduction to make this book more accessible. Because we have a lot of books which are much better to be understood by interested students and by mainstream physicians and so on. But the Steiner book, this one, it still counts to the most difficult books from Rudolf Steiner. And that is what I would like now to focus on. What makes this book so difficult? Because it is a book which consists to 99% out of methodology. It is a crystal clear description of the 5 principles which can make humans ill, the 5 principles which can humans make healthy, and what is it in the organism which makes the decision between does the further development goes more towards illness or turns more towards health. Health and illness are not what stands in front of one another, but ill-making processes and restoring, healing processes, they create the so-called battlefield of our individual health, which is in every moment a sensitive balance between feeling a bit better or feeling a bit worse. And that is the topic of this book. How is the human constitution in its becoming, in its raising and in its disappearing, fashioned? What laws are driving our physical constitution, our mineralized body? What forces are driving our life activity? We all have our lifetime. We carry it within us. We are every second another person. No moment will come back. We heard here in one contribution the double stream of time, and what is presence? There I am out of space and out of time. I am in presence. When I'm really present, I am, where am I with my mind? So we have laws who direct our mindfulness, our soul experience, and there are laws in which we focus on our own identity, in which we so-called find ourselves. And for me, having had the chance to teach anthroposophic medicine on all the continents, China, India, where are very, very high worshipped old medical systems, it was so touching on the one hand to see the interest of Ayurvedic doctors, of traditional Chinese medical doctors. There are many different schools and types of that beautiful system, how interested they were in the anthroposophic concept. And first I couldn't understand, but then in the dialogue and in looking the same patient together from the different aspects of our systems, we realized we share the same 5 principles. We have only other words for it. It is really what it is. The human being is a pentagram. And then when you study Aristotle, he spoke about these 5 principles, and along him, I gave the name of this 5th principle, which was Rudolf Steiner's finding, to really make it accessible and explain it. And it's, so to say, the core of the whole anthroposophic medicine, to understand this 5th principle. Aristotle named it pempte, ousia, the 5th essence, the 5th beinghood of the human being. And in the medieval times, in Latin, it got then the name quinta essentia. The Rosicrucians spoke about the quinta essentia, and all the alchemists, of course. But when you study these documents, you cannot understand today what it really is. And that was Rudolf Steiner's finding, and there is no book in which he describes this so detailed, with the example of many, so the main 5 possibilities to become ill, and the main 5 healing, restoring processes, as he is doing this in this book. And what is this 5th principle? I would like to invite you just to follow a very simple thought. We heard right now from Jan this deterministic, evolutionary, materialistic, Darwinistic theory named. What is the core of that theory? That humans are higher animals. And exactly this is not at all the case. Because when you compare the beauty of all the animals around us, then you see it would be wonderful if we would be animals, because then we would behave truly human, perfect human. And exactly this is not the case. You know, no cow can become cowiger, no bird can become birdiger. You know, they are perfect. And humans are already, Platon, one of our first European thinkers, highlighted this. Humans are imperfect, therefore they need education. They are not perfect by nature. And that is the secret which decides about health and illness. Because if we would be driven perfectly by instinct, by nature, to perform our human biography along the rules, we would not have any need to become ill. What can a cow learn with a broken leg? Nothing. But when we as humans have an accident, a lot of changes can happen. New thoughts can come. For us, it makes sense to live with problems because they make us wise, they make us more tolerant, they open our eyes. Of course, it's lovely to be lifelong healthy, but then you need to put much more energy in your own becoming. And if not, you degenerate and become just a living, enjoying creature without further development. So there is really a challenge meeting all us humans, and that is, do you know why you are imperfect? And where are the forces going which are hindered in your human constitution to make you by nature and instinct perfect. And that is the secret of this fifth principle. Because this, you know, we share with the minerals our physical organization, with the plants our etheric life organization, time organization, process organization. We share with the animals sensitivity, emotion, feeling, movement, expression, the soul, the macrocosmic, microcosmic connection with the world, beautiful. Yeah, and the I organization we only have for our own. And Rudolf Steiner describes it is the I organization which blocks the lower systems of law so that they have to hold back and cannot fulfill on natural pathways to make us a perfect human constitution. These forces are held back. And the etheric, the life forces, which are burying the whole wisdom of evolution, we are part of this marvelous evolution. They are held back, cannot perform physically, but they can liberate successively throughout the whole biography and primarily in childhood, when the body is formed through. These forces can liberate and become body free for our thinking capacity. And Rudolf Steiner discovered that the differentiation forces of our astral organization, who are doing the cell differentiation and organ and gender differentiation, they are liberating as body-free feelings. Thinking and feeling are natural out-of-body experiences. The brain is a reflector of this reality, but not a producer of thoughts and feelings. One will never, ever show that. And the so-called free will is not in our body. There one will not find it. But it's the out-of-body I organization. Completely free, body-free will. And therefore, we as humans can hold back ourselves, you know? All these laws are held back by the I organization, inclusive holding back our own. A mother can give the food to the child, to the husband, and must not eat it, although she is hungry. A dog will not manage this. We can hold back. And therefore, we can pay attention, we can give space, we can open up. Yeah. How much minutes are left? 1? Was my sense. Yeah. Dear friends, I'm happy just to leave it to your consideration. I will only try to round up with one thought because we had this beautiful Jewish presentation. The Old Testament celebrates 2 stories of the becoming of the human being. One, the 8-day work, or the 7-day work, sorry. 5 times God says, and he saw it was good. 6th day, when the higher animals and the humans are created, God says something different. He saw that it was, listen, very good. And it's sure this is not us. Therefore, we need the other story in the first book of Moses. God took a piece of earth and shaped the humans from below, incomplete. The fall did come. But who is the Son of God? The first creation. Created along a picture of his own. Therefore, the higher self is this Son of God, the first creation. The lower self, the creation from below, these 4 principles. And the middle sphere, the true self, where we have our to make our own decisions. What sort of human being do we want to become? What is my identity, my developmental path? Highly individual. I learned here that William Ellery Channing was called the apostle of unitarism. Rudolf Steiner, in his book and in his work, is the apostle of the general human. Thank you for listening.
Sponsored by the Program for the Evolution of Spirituality.
Copyright 2023, President and Fellows of Harvard College.